Welcome back to the TimCo Retail Manager course. This course focuses on real-world application development. In this video, we're going to set up a continuous integration process for our application. That means we use Azure DevOps to build our code every time we commit changes to that code. For those of you who subscribe to my Patreon at the $5 per month level or higher, head on over to get today's source code. Now, for those of you who are new to this project, welcome. If you're just interested in the topic this video covers, I think you'll get a great introduction in a real-world setting. If you would like to start this project from the beginning with us, there's a link in the description to the full playlist in order. There's also a link to the Phase 1 course if you want to get up to speed faster and would like the source code for each step along the way. Either way, I'd appreciate it if you give this video a like. Doing so helps spread the word and ensure that more people will be helped by this video. Okay, let's head on over to our browser. Here's our Azure DevOps setup, and we have our source code now in Azure DevOps, so we can go to the next step, which is the pipeline. Now don't forget, we also have our Azure board, our Azure site, which has the API and our two databases. So we're all set there. So now we can start setting up our build process, and then in the next video, we'll start working on our release process, releasing it to the API and the SQL databases. Okay, so let's set up our build process first. So create pipeline. And this first page right here, I'm not a huge fan of how they've gone about this. The focus has gone towards YAML, Y-A-M-L, which stands for yet another markup language. And it's a space-based markup language, meaning spaces are important. And if you don't have enough or too many, you can cause problems. I'm not going to debate whether or not YAML is a great framework or not. I'm personally not a fan. I actually like JSON better, but that's just me. But either way, this is a little harder to get started with for building your pipeline when you use YAML, because it is this text layout that then does have some GUI elements to it, but the overall process is a text process. So what we're going to do is use the classic editor instead. I love this because it is a GUI process. My only wish is that this GUI process would then just generate my YAML for me and allow me to switch back and forth between the two. So use the classic editor link down here. And this is going to ask you first, where's your source code? Now, this is really awesome because we could have said, you know what, our source code's on GitHub. And we could have pointed to our repository that was there and used that instead. We don't have to use the Azure DevOps. We're not locked into an Azure repo for our Git. We could use Subversion, Bitbucket Cloud. Another Git means you could even have Git on your local machine and point Azure DevOps to it. Not ideal probably, but you could. But in our case, our source code's here. It's just kind of easy. So TimCo Retail Manager, the repository is TimCo Retail Manager, and the default branch is master, which also means you could go to a different team project if you really wanted to. I don't see the need for that, but that is a possibility if that is what works in your environment. I would say that if you're doing that though, make sure you know why you're doing that. It would seem like it wouldn't be a good solution for most cases. Just keep it all in the same project. All right, so default branch is master, but that's just for manual or scheduled builds. That's not for, you can build off of any branch you want, but for manual or scheduled builds, master is the default. All right, let's continue. And the first thing it's going to ask us is, what is this build? Well, we could say YAML, which again is going to create that YAML experience for us, but that's not what I want. Instead, what I want is, I want let's do an ASP.NET web application, not the Azure web app for ASP.NET. And the reason why, this is just a template to get you started. You can add more things. In fact, we're going to add desktop in there as well. But this just gives you a starting point to work with. The Azure web app, what it's going to do is going to take it one step further and say that this build pipeline is also going to push out to Azure. And that's not what I want. I want a separate release pipeline versus my build pipeline. So this is continuous integration. I just want it to integrate. I don't want it to deploy. Continuous deployment will be separate, and that will be under releases, and we'll have that separate from our build pipelines. This kind of mashes those two together. You could do that. It's simple. It just works, but it doesn't have that separation there. So I prefer to do an ASP.NET as my option. Again, this is just a template to get us started. We can modify things as needed. Now this is the starter page where we have all of our information, and just note that pretty much everything on here has a menu or set of options underneath it wherever you click. So right now I've clicked on pipelines, that's the default where you start, but if you click on get resources, there's a different set of options. Click on agent job, there's a different set of options. Click on NuGet package, there's more options. So just note that all of these have options underneath them, and there's also these tabs up here, which I often at first missed. So this is our tasks. We also have variables and triggers and options and retention and history, and there's a lot of stuff here. And basically, since there's so much stuff, it's kind of all hidden under things. And so you just have to know that it's there. And one of the ways you can find where it is just click on stuff. So if I click on get sources, you'll see Azure repo Git, and there's those settings I chose. So this is what I did in this first step of the wizard, and I could modify this if I wanted to. So if you want to change it and say, oh, we're actually on GitHub now, you just click on GitHub and change the location. But let's start from the beginning. So this is where you start with. I'm actually going to change this right here. This is going to be, instead of CI at the end, it's going to be the standard continuous integration build. All right, so that's the standard continuous integration build. That's the build name of this this pipeline. Okay, so now the agent pool, we can use the Azure Pipelines agent pool or our private. So what this is Microsoft gives us servers to build our code on by default. Now there is a limited number of minutes you get, but I believe it's a lot of minutes that you get for free. And if you're an open source project, you get even more minutes for free. So if you wanted to control where your build process was, or if you wanted more speed, you could use this drop down here and choose a private agent pool. And that will pull from your machines. So you can set things up, and the pool information and manage right here. These links will take you to more information about how to set up a private pool. That can be really helpful for a full production environment. So you're building a real application that's got, a more sizable build process, then I would recommend creating that private build agent. It's getting faster, and it's going to be able to cache things for you in a way that the provided one cannot. But this way, you can have a lot of things going on, and it's just more efficient to do it that way. So, but for our purposes, the Azure Pipeline hosted version is just fine. That will do the work you want. Agent specified, you can choose which agent is doing our build. I'm going to leave it at VS 2017, Windows 2016. Actually, you know what? I'm going to choose Windows 2019. If you had things that you needed to have different versions for, then you'd have to choose that. So for example, if I was doing a UWP application, I'd almost definitely want the 2019 Windows version, because if I have that, then I have the latest APIs, or I should, for building. Versus if I am building just a .NET Core web application, I might choose Ubuntu as my build process because I can build on Linux. All right, but I can't here because I'm doing a build for an exe, an executable, and for a web app. Okay, so now we have the parameters, which says what's the path to your solution or package config. Well, it's */**.sln, meaning find the solution file. Wherever it is, use that for building. And the artifact name is drop. That's the name of the zip file that will host all of our built files. Okay, so that's good. Let's leave it like so. We'll go to get sources. The only one I want to change in here is tag source on success. I like to add tag and just say something like build underscore and the build number. And what that will do is it will say, it'll add a git tag to whatever commit we have and say this was built on this build number. So you can kind of track through and see where a build goes. Okay, so that's the only thing I'm going to do, and that's on success only, not always. That way you don't tag failing builds. All right, agent job. And by the way, those tags, that's just for informational purposes. That's not going to affect your source code, and it's not going to really affect anything. It's just for informational purpose. This was built, and this is the build number. All right, agent job. I don't think there's anything in here we need to change, so let's leave it alone. NuGet package. So it says get NuGet version. We can change it to version 1. So note here that this says get NuGet.exe to install is 4.4.1. I believe that's not the latest. We'll have to check. And let's see available NuGet versions. Right now, 5.4.0 is the latest released and blessed version. There is early access preview version. Let me zoom in here a little bit. That's probably better. So the released and blessed version of NuGet is 5.4.0. All right. So, and there is preview versions. Now, I get to choose which version of NuGet I download, because if I have been building on a certain NuGet version and a newer NuGet version were to break my build, that wouldn't be good. And so this allows me to choose which version to use. Now, here we have task version. So it's a newer version of this task. And so since I am just building this now, I'm going to go to the newest version of this task. The nice thing here is Microsoft doesn't change your tasks on you automatically. It's only going to change minor revisions. So notice it says 1.star versus 0.star. That means that minor versions will be updated. So if there's a bug fix or something in a task, they will fix that. But they're not going to have breaking changes where it's going to break your build because they updated something. You have to do that manually. You get the option if you want to or not. So this newest version, under advanced, the version NuGet to install, I could say always check for new versions, and I can say, what was that version again? Is it 5.4.0? So I'm going to do 5.4.0, but always check for new versions. That's fine. I don't think it's going to break anything. Notice it did change the display name. That's kind of cool. So set as that. Then NuGet restore. This is on the latest version, version 2, which is a NuGet restore of our solution file. So it's going to restore the solution file, meaning it's going to pull down any NuGet packages the solution needs. So for our WPF application, it's going to need Calibre and Micro. For our API project, it's going to need a few of the Microsoft things, including and also Swagger. So there's a few different packages going to pull down from that. This is one of those areas where a private build server helps because it can cache some of this stuff versus having to redo it every time, since Microsoft's provided one doesn't remember you from time to time because it's being used by everybody, not just you. Okay, so NuGet feed. You can pull from an Azure Artifacts, that's section right here, or TFS feed. So I could pull from an Artifacts feed and use that instead of my NuGet feed. We'll probably do that in the future, where we'll set up an artifact feed, even if we don't have our own NuGet private or private NuGet packages, because that allows some caching in Azure DevOps of those NuGet packages, so that if the owner pulled them out of the store or pulled them out of NuGet, that we would still have access to them and it wouldn't break our build. But for now, we can leave that alone and then go to build solution. Here is the build solution. It says deploy on build is true. Web publish method is package. Package as a single file is true. Skip invalid configuration. I think we're going to have to change some of this stuff, especially since we're going to be packaging two different things. There's the API project and there's the WPF project. So we have an EXE project and we have a web project. So we'll probably have to change something there, but for right now, what we're going to do is leave it alone. MS build arguments are a pain because the documentation has gotten better, but it's still not great. If you go here, learn more about this task, it's going to, first of all, give you the YAML, which, okay, great. But then it's going to give you some build arguments in here, and there's a list of other arguments. MS build command line reference, I believe is what it is. And then you can go through here, and there's a list of other arguments that you can go through. So, can be a pain sometimes. We'll get to that in a minute. We'll see if that's a problem. Test assembly. We don't currently have unit testing in place, so there's no reason to try and run unit testing. But I do want it in the future. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that I'm going to turn this option off. So uncheck the enable box under control options, and that's just going to skip this test. Publish symbol path. We don't have a place to publish our symbols. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, again, turn this off. I'd probably delete it at some point if I'm not going to publish my symbols. We'll see if we do or not. A symbol file is the PDB file. So if you ever look in your bin debug directory after you do a build, you'll see you have, like, so for the Win or the WPF project, you'll have your exe file, and then you'll have a PDB file with the same name. And what that is a file that helps with debugging your application. So if your application is running, the exe is running, and it's getting an error, but it's not giving you any good information what that error is, you can use the PDB to debug that exe file. So usually what you do is you publish those to a path that allows you to point to those PDB files and debug your in-production applications. That's a subject for a whole nother day because it's a pretty large subject around doing so safely and securely, but at the same time not cutting yourself off at the knees by not having them at all. So again, we'll cover that probably later. All right, publish artifacts. What this does, it sounds like you're doing something with them, but all you're really doing is putting them in that drop zip file. So that's good. We'll leave that alone. Let's just do this. Let's save and queue this operation just to see if it runs. Okay, and save comments, no comments. We're going to run the master branch by default. That's great. And save and run. And almost every time I do this setup, something fails. Okay, so don't think that getting this right the first time is a normal thing. I get this wrong all the time. It's usually a little setting here or there. I think that solution build file is going to be a problem because of our API and WPF project, but we'll see. So my thought is we'll probably have to do a build of just the project file for the API, and then do a build for just the project file for the WPF project, and separately put them into zip files or something similar. So we'll figure that out. We'll figure out what to do there. But first I want to run through and see what happens. Now let's dive in just a little bit. We'll click on the agent job number 1 and see what it's doing. So it has checked out our source code. It has downloaded, is using NuGet 5.4.0, and now it's doing a NuGet restore. And notice the command window over here. It's a little small. I believe we can make it a little bigger. The problem is that it makes everything bigger, not just this window. And this font's pretty small. And it was just done. If you go back here, you can see it. It does the restore. Here's all the packages it's restoring, and it's a lot. But if we scroll down to the bottom here, now what we're doing is the build. So there's the NuGet. Now we've installed 21 packages to the library, 10 to the other library, 135 to the API, and 15 to the user interface. 135 seems a little high. I think what it is that packages rely on other packages, and so that's why it's 135. If you actually look in NuGet, it's not nearly that much, but that's my guess. So, yeah, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, I know it sounds scary to have 135 packages, but the reality is you saw that it took not that long to do. A total restore time of 1 minute, 5 seconds. So not a big deal even on this shared server. So that idea of composition, so we're composing packages, we're pulling things in as we need them, rather than just having one massive package that has stuff we don't need. Okay, so I said that I almost never get a working build on the first go round, and I can't say that anymore, guys, because it worked. Now, what worked, we'll see. But the build, notice you have a warning here. If we scroll down, there's a few more, but at the end, it'll show us our warnings. We have 14 warnings, but 0 errors, so that did work. And it will give us the list of warnings. Notice the warnings here. So warnings like this package, so this package right here, let's see if we can make it go over just a little slower. Was restored using .NET Framework version 4.6.1 instead of the project target framework of .NET Core 3.1. So it may not be compatible. It is compatible, but just so you know. Okay, so the publish the artifact seems to have worked. Let's go back to our job. We do have our warnings. Notice the warnings down here. Let's zoom back out because it's a little hard to see everything. But that's a little small. So let's try and compromise, I guess. There's our warning list. So there's all the warnings that it had, which is great. It surfaces those even though they didn't stop the build, but it just says, hey, you should probably know what these. And in fact, we should. There's a warning here because the call is not awaited. Okay, well, that's usually a problem. I don't believe it is in this case, but I don't remember for sure. So this depends on Caliburn Micro 100-alpha. That was not found. So it used instead Caliburn Micro 4.0.105-alpha, which is found. Remember, we had to use a custom NuGet feed for the Caliburn Micro alpha builds. Well, that's now been resolved. It's actually an alpha on NuGet.org that we can use that works with .NET Core 3.1. So it used that, which is really cool that it found the nearest version. We'll just update that ourselves. Okay, so with this, we have 2 artifacts published. We have our label, and then we have our drop. Our drop has 16 megabytes of stuff in it, and it's got this zip file in it, which if I open this up, I've got to download it in order to open it up. But it has the manifest as well as a README and other things. Let's open this zip file up, and the contents of this, if we go in here, this is a web deploy. So there's the, there we go. This is a web deploy contents for our application. It does not look like we have our exe in here. I don't think it built the executable file. It has the API executable file, but it doesn't have the WPF executable file. So I think it just did the web side of the build. So we'll have to play around that a little bit more to get the desktop side of the build working, which we'll do in probably a future video. I think for now this is good though, because it's actually working. Okay, so it's working, it's doing the build. The next thing we need to do is we need to make a modification to this, which is to make it run automatically. So to do that, we're going to go to ellipsis here and say edit pipeline. And we're back here. let's go to triggers. And in this trigger, we're going to say enable continuous integration, which is awesome. And so now it says, well, which branches do you want to build? And we're going to build, for right now, we're building just the master branch. But what you can say is include and then just say star. Hit enter. And now it will build any branch. So whenever you push a branch, it's going to build it. And that's really helpful in a lot of circumstances where you just say, you know what, I'm going to push this up to the server. If you push it to the server, we're going to build it for you. That way we make sure that it does, if we have unit testing, it passes all the unit tests. Either way, we make sure that it builds and nothing breaks. And so by doing that, let's just save this. Now it is enabled for continuous integration. Now let's verify that's the case. I believe on the board we did have, yes, update NuGet packages to release versions. We're going to do a part of this, but not all of it. So let's just do, for now, we're just going to tackle the WPF dependencies. So let's go to manage NuGet packages. And we have Caliber and Micro, and it's the version 4.0.100-alpha. Remember, that's the problem one because it's not on NuGet.org. And the source of NuGet.org says, here's my versions I have. Well, I want the 105 alpha. So we're going to update that. And as long as that works, and it seems to, if we run this, make sure it runs, we're going to stick with the version that's actually on NuGet. So I'm going to run this, make sure that our WPF project works. So we're going to log in. Wait for it. There we go. Sales page still seems to work. If we go to our user management, we can see that this still seems to work as well. And so let's log out and exit our application. And we're going to call that our test. This is why unit testing is so helpful, because I just ran through a really quick test of kind of the happy path. I didn't test anything on the edge cases, but I do think that this works. So what I can do is go to my changes. I have one change, which is to my CS proj. I'm going to stage this, and I'm going to say updated the Caliber and Micro NuGet package version. Updated to a version actually on NuGet. I'm going to commit stage, and I'm going to push. Okay. Now, let's go back over here. Let's go back to our pipelines and notice that this now says queued. I mean, it's already happened. So we just pushed our code, and it's already queued a new build. So you click on that, notice it's starting to build that next build, and it will go through the process of actually building out our application again, testing those new changes and making sure that we have a passing build. So I don't think we have to sit through the entire build process again, but what's going to happen now is every time we commit code, it's going to build the code, and that's going to send me an email. And I have the email set up to send me an email with success or failure, but you can set it up however you want in the project settings. But with that, what happens is I get told whenever a new build happens, which as a single developer, that's really helpful if you see that a build happens without you being around. That would mean somebody else has access to your repository. But also, if you're on a team, then you can see, oh, somebody else built the application, or there's a failing build. Somebody made a mistake, or I get an email saying, your push just failed the build. And then I know, oops, I have to fix something. I don't want to release that into, or try to release that. It won't release because it's failed the build. But you don't want to try and push that manually, especially if you have a process separate from your build process for your release process. Okay, so that's the process of setting up continuous integration. It was just set up that pipeline. We will make some changes to that pipeline in the future as we tweak it in order to get it to work separately for our API versus our EXE projects. But for right now, it's building the API and it's ready to go to actually deploy that API even. Okay? So with that, up next, what we'll do is set up our deployment for our APIs, a continuous deployment process, which may involve as well. I'm not sure if we'll do it next video or the video after, but we'll also set up the build process for our database as well. Okay? Thanks for watching, and as always, I am Tim Corey.